In Planet Reddit, today's story is...
My father left his entire inheritance to my brother, and 2 years later, he discovered a financial secret that left him ruined. His desperation led him to do the unthinkable. My brother Reed is 31 and I, Mabel, am 34. I am a woman, and we come from a family with a good economic position, what many would consider upper middle class. My father was a business owner, following in the footsteps of my grandfather. In some way, entrepreneurship runs in our family. There was always the expectation that both Reed and I would follow the same path, although I don't think anyone really expected me to. At the age of 28, I made the decision to start my own business. It wasn't something that happened overnight. I spent years working in different companies, absorbing as much knowledge as possible, making mistakes. At the age of 28, I made the decision to start my own business. It wasn't something that happened overnight. I spent years working in different companies, absorbing as much knowledge as possible, making mistakes, finding solutions, and discovering what worked and what didn't. I saved constantly, eliminating unnecessary expenses, giving up vacations, and making sure I accumulated enough capital. My friend and I, both equally determined and tired of working under the orders of others, finally took the plunge. We obtained a bank loan, completed all the necessary documentation, and launched our own commercial construction company. It was not an easy road. We spent whole nights without sleep worrying about projects, workers, permits, budgets. Every little detail that could go wrong eventually did go wrong, but we managed to survive. No, more than surviving, we prospered. I am truly proud of what we built, and best of all, I did it without taking a penny from my father. My dad is old school. He believes strongly in family legacy and passing on wealth, in keeping the family name strong through money and influence. Last year, he decided to retire. He had been talking about it for some time, mentioning that he wanted to spend his golden years in a warm place. So when he announced that he was moving to Florida, I wasn't surprised at all. But then he dropped another shocking piece of news. He informed me that he was leaving his entire estate to my brother Reed. Not splitting it up, not considering me at all, just handing it all over to Reed as if I didn't even exist in this equation. I was completely shocked. It took me a moment to process what she was saying. Of course, I had my own business, and I wasn't experiencing financial difficulties, but that wasn't the point. What hurt was the fact that he had completely ruled me out, as if I didn't matter, as if I wasn't even an option to consider. I asked him why. I needed to understand his reasoning, and his answer was, "You have time to marry a rich man. You should do that." In fact, I laughed because I thought he was joking. I thought maybe he was just playing with me, seeing how I would react. But no, he was completely serious. My father, a man who had raised me to be independent, was telling me that my financial security should come from a husband, that I should simply find a wealthy man, get married, and base my future on that. Meanwhile, my brother, who had a stable job but wasn't exactly swimming in wealth, apparently needed the money more because what? Because he was a man? I told him that his position was incredibly unfair. And do you know what he replied? He shrugged and said, "That's just the reality of the world." I could have argued, I could have pointed out how absurd it was, how I had worked so hard to get where I was, how I had taken risks and built something from scratch without any help, how I had done exactly what he had always taught us. Be self-sufficient, work hard, earn what we have. But I didn't, because what would it have achieved? He had already made up his mind. So I just left. I didn't argue. I didn't fight. I just withdrew. Reed also refused to support me. Not that I expected him to fight for me or anything like that, but it would have been nice to at least feel that he recognized that the whole situation was unfair. Instead, he just acted as if it wasn't his problem. He received the inheritance, and that was it. It was Dad's decision, after all. But what Reed didn't know was that the supposed inheritance he was so excited about wasn't exactly what he thought it was. A few years ago, I had helped out with some accounting work for my father's company, just handling small tasks here and there. I'm not an accountant or anything, but I'm organized and Dad needed someone he could trust. As I went through the numbers, I noticed something worrying. Dad's money wasn't safely tucked away in a savings account or stable investments. He was involved in all kinds of risky businesses, and many of them seemed suspicious. Dad had always been a bit reckless with money. He loved chasing big opportunities, The ones that promise huge returns if only you had the patience to wait. Real estate deals that never seem to progress. Startups with no real plan, even cryptocurrencies. He got really involved with cryptocurrencies for a while, throwing money at them like he was some kind of tech mogul. I remember watching him talk about it, convinced he was ahead of his time while ignoring all the warning signs. At the time, I told myself it wasn't my problem. If he wanted to risk his money, that was his business. But in the back of my mind, I knew that if Reed ever received that inheritance, he would be in for a very unpleasant surprise. And sure enough, about a year later, Reed showed up at my door practically begging for my help. Over the last year, he had been making promises based on the assumption that he was about to receive a fortune. He had started his own business which, to be honest, was not the most well-thought-out idea. He had also borrowed money, not only from banks, but from private lenders and even from some people who, let's say, are not the friendliest when it comes to collecting debts. He had built his entire financial future on the belief that once Dad handed over the inheritance, he would be able to pay it all back. And then, when the moment finally arrived, Dad told him exactly what I had anticipated. The money wasn't really available. It was tied up in projects that would bear fruit eventually. That was the phrase he used. Eventually. No specific deadlines, no guarantees, just vague promises that things would work out someday. Reed was completely taken aback. He had assumed that this money was liquid, that he would be handed a check or given access to a trust fund or something similar. Instead, he realized too late that what he had really inherited was a mess, an unpredictable and unstable collection of investments that might never come to fruition. He was now committed to an absurd amount of money, and the people he had borrowed it from wanted it back, and fast. So he came to me. I could tell he was desperate the moment I saw him. He looked exhausted, as if he hadn't slept in days, and he had that nervous energy of someone who knows they've made a serious mistake but doesn't want to admit how bad the situation is. He tried to hide it at first, asking me how my business was doing, making small talk as if we were just catching up. But it didn't take long before he got to the real reason he was there. He needed money. He didn't say it directly at first, but it was obvious. He started talking about how well my company was doing, how he had always been smart with money, how proud he was of what I had built. He was preparing the ground, trying to soften me up before making his request. But I knew exactly what was coming next. Eventually, he got to the point. He needed a loan, and not a small one. He needed enough to cover the debts he had accumulated over the last year, and, from the way he was talking, it was a considerable amount. I sat there listening to him. All I could think was that none of this was my responsibility. I had worked for every penny I had. I had spent years building my business from scratch, making sacrifices along the way. I had lived frugally, reinvesting every dollar I could and making careful financial decisions because I knew that no one would rescue me if things went wrong. And now here was Reed, expecting me to fix a problem he had created himself. The worst part was that he never supported me when Dad decided to give him the whole inheritance. When they told me I should marry a rich man instead of waiting for an inheritance, he just stood there, letting it happen. He never questioned whether it was fair, never considered whether I deserved better. But now that he was in trouble, he suddenly wanted to act as if we were in this together. I wondered what would have happened if the roles had been reversed. If I had been the one in difficulty, and he had been the one with money, would he have helped me? And the answer was obvious. He wouldn't have. So I said no. He didn't take it well. He tried to make me feel guilty, saying that families should help each other, that he would do the same for me. He even got a little angry, like I owed him something just because we were brothers. But I stood my ground. I wasn't going to clean up his mess. He left after that, looking completely defeated. I don't know what he's going to do next. Maybe he'll find a solution, or maybe he won't. Maybe Dad's investments will pay off eventually, and he'll get the money he was promised. But that's not my problem. But over the next few days, I continued to discover more and more details of the absolute disaster that Reed had created. At first I thought he had only ruined his personal finances and taken on some high-risk loans, which was bad enough. But then I discovered that he had done something even worse. He had put our parents' house up as collateral for a loan from a loan shark. And now those people were threatening to sell it. That house meant everything to me. It wasn't just a building. It was where we grew up, where so many memories lived. It was where I spent the last years with my mother before she passed away. I can still see her in the kitchen making tea the way she always did, humming an old song softly. I can still hear her voice in the hallways, calling us in for dinner. The thought of losing that house, our home, was unbearable. I don't know what Reed was thinking. He knew what that house meant to me. He knew how much I loved it, and yet he had risked everything because he thought he had an easy way out with Dad's supposed inheritance. He was so sure he would receive all that money that he never stopped to consider what would happen if things didn't go as he expected. I wasn't going to let him destroy one of the few things I had left from my mother. So I decided to intervene. I contacted Reed and told him I was willing to help with the house. He seemed relieved at first, probably thinking I was going to bail him out completely. But I wasn't doing this for him. I was doing it for myself. I wasn't going to let some loan shark take away the place that meant so much to me. So I contacted the loan shark directly. The conversation was tense. These people weren't exactly friendly, and they didn't care at all about my emotional attachment to the house. They just wanted their money back. But after a lot of negotiation, I managed to work out a payment plan with them. It wasn't going to be easy, but at least it meant the house was safe. Once everything was settled, I went back to Reed and explained the agreement. The house was mine now. I was the one paying for it, so I would be the one living in it. He could stay in the guest house until he sorted out his problems, but that was it. He didn't take it well. He tried to argue that the house was big enough for both of us, that we could live there together, but I wouldn't budge. From my perspective, he had put the house in danger. He had made the reckless decisions, and I was the one who was sorting everything out. If I was going to take responsibility, I was going to lay down the law. And the first rule, clear boundaries. I told him straight that I didn't want to live with him. I needed my space, and I wasn't going to deal with his mess every day under the same roof. The guest house was more than enough for him. He had his own entrance, a small kitchen, a bathroom. I wasn't throwing him out on the street. I just wasn't going to live in the main house with him. He called me selfish. He acted as if I was being unreasonable, as if I was punishing him, but I wasn't. I was just tired of cleaning up after him, tired of watching him make mistake after mistake and expecting other people to fix it. He moved into the guest house, but he made sure I knew exactly how he felt about it. Every chance he got, he would hurl biting comments at me. He called me selfish, insensitive, more times than I could count. If I ran into him outside, he would make some passive-aggressive comment about how I was enjoying my little kingdom while he was banished to the back of the property like an unwanted guest. He even tried to involve mutual friends, telling them how I had stolen his house and left him with nothing. He still doesn't get it. I didn't take anything from him. He lost it the moment he put it up as collateral. He risked something he had no right to risk. I was the one who saved him. I was the one who paid the price. He still doesn't seem to have learned anything. He continues to act as if I am the villain in his story, as if I am the one who did something wrong. He refuses to take responsibility for the whole thing. So now I find myself wondering, am I really the bad guy in this situation? Should I have let him stay in the main house? Should I have been more understanding? Or am I right to finally set clear boundaries? Update 1. Hi everyone. I know it's been 2 months since my initial post, and I just wanted to say that I really appreciate all the support and advice I received from you all. I really wasn't expecting such a response, but it helped me feel like I wasn't wrong to set boundaries. A lot has happened since then, and honestly, things with Reed haven't improved at all. If anything, they've gotten worse. For the last 2 months, I've been living in our parents' house, my home now. I've been working hard to make it feel like my space. But as expected, Reed hasn't made things any easier. A couple of weeks ago, I caught him snooping around the house. And to this day, I have no idea what he was looking for. It was late at night, and I had been in my room relaxing after a long day. I was about to go to sleep when I heard a noise downstairs. At first I thought maybe it was just the house settling, but then I heard footsteps. My heart raced because for a split second I thought someone had broken in. But when I quietly left my room and looked down the hallway, I saw Reed sneaking away into the darkness with his phone flashlight on. I stood there watching him for a moment, trying to process what the hell I was seeing. He was in the study opening drawers and rifling through papers. My first thought was that maybe he had left something there when Dad was still living in the house. But then I realized that he had no reason to be in that room at all. He hadn't lived in this house for years. So I turned on the lights and said, "What the hell are you doing?" And from the way he jumped, I knew I'd caught him. He tried to cover it up, muttering something about looking for an old document, but I didn't believe him. If he needed something, he could have asked me. Instead, he was sneaking around the house in the middle of the night like an intruder. I asked him what he was really looking for, and he just got defensive. He told me to calm down and acted like I was making a big deal out of nothing. But I knew something was wrong. I checked the drawers he had been looking in and couldn't determine if anything was missing, but he left me feeling uneasy. I don't know if he was looking for documents, money, or some kind of information to use against me. But whatever it was, it didn't feel right. After that, I made sure to lock my office and any drawers with important documents. And then, as if that wasn't enough, Dad decided to get involved out of the blue. Reed must have contacted him because a week later, Dad flew in from Florida. Yes, you read that right. In fact, he flew in just to pressure me into giving Reed money. He showed up at the house one morning completely unannounced. I opened the door and found him standing there with his suitcase, acting like this was some kind of family reunion. He gave me this big cheery hug as if he hadn't taken me by surprise. I knew immediately that something was up. Dad doesn't make casual visits, especially when he's enjoying his retirement in Florida, living his dream life. After long enough, within minutes, he started talking about Reed. "Listen, Mabel," he says, sitting down at the kitchen table as if he were about to have a serious conversation. "Reed is in a difficult situation. He just needs a little help to get back on his feet." I stared at him because, honestly, the last time we spoke, he basically told me that I was on my own and that Reed deserved the inheritance. Now suddenly he cared about justice. Now he expected me to fix things. I told him very clearly that I had done enough. I saved the house. I gave Reed a place to stay, and I wasn't going to bail him out financially. But Dad kept insisting. He started talking about how family helps family, and how I had a responsibility to make sure my brother didn't fail. He even tried to make me feel guilty by saying things like, "Your mother wouldn't have wanted you to be like this." That hit a nerve. I hate it when people bring up Mom to manipulate me. Mom was kind, yes. She believed in family, yes. But she also believed in responsibility. She was the kind of person who helped people who helped themselves, not people who expected her to give them everything while they did nothing to solve their own problems. I told Dad exactly that, and as you'd expect, he didn't like it. He started acting like I was being unreasonable, that I was holding on to resentment instead of just helping my brother. But I stood my ground. I told him that Reed wasn't my responsibility, that he'd had plenty of chances to get his life together. And I wasn't going to spend my hard-earned money just because Dad felt bad about giving him a worthless inheritance. That's when Dad's whole attitude changed. He sighed, shook his head, and said, "I just don't understand why you're being so cold about this." That word cold stuck with me. It was the same thing Reed had been calling me for weeks. Apparently defending my interests meant that I was the bad guy in the situation. After that, Dad never mentioned it again. He stayed in a hotel for a couple of days, acted distant, and then left. He didn't even say goodbye in person. He just sent a text message saying he was flying back to Florida. Reed, of course, was furious when he found out I wouldn't give in. He's been even more bitter ever since, barely speaking to me, unless it's to throw out a passive-aggressive comment. The other day, I passed him outside and he muttered, "Money really does change people, doesn't it?" As if I weren't the same person who saved a situation by preventing him from losing his house. As if I hadn't already done much more for him than he ever did for me. At this point, I'm completely exhausted. Tired of explaining myself. Tired of feeling guilty. Tired of all of it. I've spent so much of my life worrying about whether I'm being fair, kind, or helpful. But where was that concern when I needed support? Where was my financial backing? Oh, right, I didn't have it. So yeah, that's the update. Reed is still in the guest house, still angry with me, and still waiting for the world to hand him a solution. And honestly, that's his problem now, not mine. Thanks again to everyone who gave me advice in my previous post. I really needed the validation, and honestly, I'm proud of myself for standing my ground. Update 2. Hi everyone, about a week ago, I noticed that some of my expensive handbags had disappeared. At first, I thought maybe I had misplaced them. I don't use them often, and some were stored in my closet. so I thought they might have been buried under something. But the more I looked, the more I realized they were gone. And not just any handbags. Some of them were gifts from my mother, pieces she had collected over the years. She wasn't really a lover of designer handbags, but she had some that she valued. And when she passed away, she left them to me. They had a sentimental value far greater than any price they might have. Losing them felt like losing another part of her. And that's what made my stomach feel queasy. When I realized that they weren't where I had last left them, I started searching everywhere. I took apart my wardrobe, checked the storage boxes under my bed. I even searched the whole room in case I had put them somewhere random. Nothing. That's when my suspicion kicked in, and, well, who else could I suspect but Reed? I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but let's face it, he was the only other person living on the property. And given his track record of terrible decisions, it wasn't exactly far-fetched to think he might have taken them. So I went to his guest house and knocked on the door. When he opened it, I asked him straight out if he knew anything about my missing handbags. And of course, he acted completely surprised. He played dumb, giving me that fake confused look like he had no idea what I was talking about. He even had the nerve to say, "Why would I take your handbags? What would I do with them?" I didn't believe him. I looked at his face carefully and could tell something was wrong. He wasn't looking me in the eye. His voice was a little too casual, as if he was trying hard to sound innocent. I didn't press him right away, because I knew that if he had taken them, he wouldn't admit it easily. So I said to him, "Well, if you see them, let me know." And I left, but in my mind, I was already forming a plan. Later that night, when Reed was out, I decided to check his guest house. I knew that if he had stolen the handbags, they would be somewhere there. I checked his wardrobe, under his bed. I even checked the bathroom cabinets in case he was really careless and hid them in plain sight. But I found nothing. For a moment, I began to doubt myself. Maybe I really had misplaced them. Maybe I was being too harsh. But then I saw his laptop on his desk. Now, I know some people might say that checking his computer was an invasion of privacy, but at this point I didn't care. If he was stealing from me, I had every right to find out. This genius didn't even have a password. I clicked on her browsing history, and within seconds I had all the proof I needed. There were Google searches for how much is a Chanel bag worth, how to sell used designer handbags, and even best sites to sell handbags quickly. My heart started racing as I continued scrolling, and that's when I saw it, her eBay page. And right there, clear as day, were my mother's handbags for sale. I felt sick. Not only had he stolen from me, but he was selling my mother's things that really meant something to me. I was so angry that I had to step outside just to take a deep breath. If he had been standing in front of me at that moment, I think I might have lost it. I took photos of everything, his search history, the eBay ads, everything. I needed proof in case he tried to deny what he had done. Then I waited. A couple of hours later, Reed finally returned. The moment he walked through the door, I confronted him. I didn't even give him a chance to speak. I held up my phone with the screenshots and said, "Explain this." The color drained from his face. He stammered for a second, trying to come up with some kind of excuse, but I cut him off. I told him I didn't want to hear whatever pathetic lie he was about to come up with. I told him he had a choice: leave tomorrow morning or I would call the police. He tried to backtrack, saying that he was just trying to earn some extra money and that he was going to tell me eventually. He even had the nerve to say, "I was going to give you some of the money," as if that would make it any better. I told him to shut up. I was sick of his lies, sick of his excuses, sick of him. I told myself, leave in the morning or I'll call the police. He must have seen on my face that I wasn't lying because he didn't argue after that. He just stormed off, muttering something under his breath, slamming the door behind him. The next morning I woke up early, half expecting to find him still there, refusing to leave, but to my surprise, he was gone. I spent too much of my life trying to clean up his messes, trying to be the bigger person, but no more. Update 3. Hello, everyone. It's been almost 6 months since my last update, and honestly, I thought I was done with the whole thing. But of course, life had other plans. Reed has apparently managed to escape the loan sharks, which is both surprising and unsurprising at the same time. I hadn't heard a single thing about him in months. No messages, no calls, no casual gossip from the extended family, nothing. The only reason I heard anything was because one of the lenders showed up at my door. He introduced himself and said he'd been trying to contact Reed for a while, but Reed had basically disappeared. No answering calls, no messages, nothing. So now, for some reason, this guy thought I might know where he is. I told him straight up, I have no idea where Reed is, and I have no intention of finding out. He seemed skeptical, but there wasn't much he could do. I wasn't going to start looking for my brother just to help the guy find him. So the loan shark left. Even after everything Reed did, I was a little worried, not because I felt bad for him, but because disappearing like that, that's not normal, even for him. So I called Dad. All he told me was that he knows Reed is safe, but that's it. No details, no explanations, nothing. Just he's safe. That was all I needed to know. Because at the end of the day, Reed is no longer my problem. He made his choices, burned all the bridges he had, and now he has to deal with the consequences. So yeah, I think this is it. The final update. Thanks, Reddit, for listening to me throughout this process. It's been a roller coaster, but I'm finally finished.